Okay, this is what a normal t-shirt looks like when it's dropped from 20 feet. This is what a designer t-shirt looks like when it is dropped from 20 feet. Okay, so you at least want t-shirts to be 200 GSM. The problem is that no websites will tell you what the GSM for their clothing is, but guess what? It doesn't matter at all. In fact, most TikTok style advice like that for finding quality clothing is, for all intents and purposes, it's totally useless. Don't get me wrong, everything is made much shittier now, like obviously. And because everything is objectively worse, there is a ton of content online about how to find quality boots, how to find well-made jeans, how to find a bra that doesn't completely suck. So most of that advice is misleading at best, but that's only because our modern quality problem is much deeper than people realize. No setup, no waffling. I am here to figure out what the fuck people are talking about when they say that a piece of clothing is high quality. I get what the definition of quality is. I even wrote it down for you. The standard of something compared to similar things, or how good or bad something is. Sure, fine. That's not what we're talking about. We all know when we are feeling something that is high quality. It elicits that like, oh wow feeling, right? And like two people who are asked separately and don't know each other given the same garment would probably agree that something is or is not high quality, especially by comparison to something similar. I'm gonna give you an example here, and it's gonna seem like a mega stupid example, but bear with me because this mega stupid example is how most fast fashion companies go about trying to produce quality things in a laughably bad way. Let's say we have a guy named Andrew. Andrew has been instructed to make a very high quality shirt. There are 3 qualifiers here. Andrew has no experience making clothes. He has essentially unlimited time to make the clothes in, and he can only work off of written instructions. No internet, and no one is there to help him. Could Andrew, under these conditions, make what me and Anna Wintour would agree is a high quality shirt? Well, I am super duper into shirts, so I can at least get Andrew started with a couple of baseline instructions. First of all, buttons. No plastic buttons. We want to use like warm horn buttons or something that is nicer than plastic. Another thing we could tell him is that the shirt should be made of really high quality cloth. Wait, we're already moving too fast. What does high quality cloth mean? I said this would be a quick example, so we're not going to worry about that right now, just Italian cloth. Oh, and instead, you know what? This will help Andrew a ton. Instead of like a regular collar like this, we'll put a button just only on the back of the collar, so it's not poking out the front, but it just kind of is in the back, so it can always look perfect, but it doesn't look like a button-down collar. That'll make a great shirt. Can Andrew still make a bad shirt with those directions? Like, obviously, yes, Andrew is absolutely going to fuck up that shirt. If he's had no experience and he's just in there making a shirt, those directions are not enough. Danny just said, yeah, fuck you, Andrew. But to be fair to him, I only gave Andrew a handful of instructions. Like, would it be better if I gave Andrew like this many directions, like a Nancy Drew's book worth of directions? Could he make a quality shirt for sure then? Nope. What I just described is a technical manual, and technical manuals have never helped anyone make quality work. You cannot execute a well-performed surgery off of a technical manual. You cannot write a great novel based off of a technical manual. And Andrew could, this poor guy, Andrew couldn't paint a damn room, just like, you know, the kind of paint job that you would hire a paint company for. Andrew could not do that based off of instructions alone. If you brought in a professional painter to examine Andrew's work after he followed every direction as well as he could, the professional painter would look at it and be like, it's all right. He would not say, wow, what a beautiful job on this room. Brilliant. Many fast fashion companies, like, are we even talking about fashion anymore? Many fast fashion companies try to get away with using this Andrew level of thinking in order to prove that they are high quality in some bullshit way. Do you remember back in 2012 when everyone wanted to dress like a lumberjack? All the cool guys were talking about weirdly specific details about denim on the internet. And so a lot of companies came out and started screaming from the rooftops that their denim had selvage in it. Most guys don't even understand what selvage is. Most people don't really care what selvage is. They just know that all of the dorks online that talk about denim constantly are always saying this word selvage. So I guess Uniqlo jeans are great. So we can be smartasses. I'm certainly a smartass about this all we want. But at the end of the day, I think we all know in our hearts that the presence of selvage does not make a pair of jeans high quality. In fact, there are like a lot of jeans with selvage that are low quality. So if you're wondering, this episode took me months to write. There are multiple books that I had to read to research for this, and like 9 fashion weeks worth of information just bouncing around in my head. And the only way that Daniela and I are able to take time to read books in order to prepare for episodes or go to Fashion Week is because this is our full-time job. It is our full-time job for both of us. And frankly, if you want what I consider to be the best fashion coverage in the entire industry to continue, we need financial support specifically through Patreon. You get a ton of perks, like you get extra videos, you get extended videos of the Margiela series that we did a while back, full-length interviews with genius designers that we'll speak on in this very video, and a special series where I take you through the stories and the details behind literally every article of clothing that I own. We had to split those episodes up into like multiple episodes for just the category of like coats or shirts, not because I own just such an enormous number of clothes, but because there was just a lot to talk about with each of them. I really like take my time. There's like, when we started the Patreon, there was kind of this unspoken agreement between us and our audience at large, which is that if we have enough to pay a salary for both of us and a small business budget, we will produce the best fashion coverage we are capable of making. I feel that we have met our end of the deal on that. And as our goals continue to grow and get bigger, most of those goals having to do with quality, we need your support. If you get value from this, all I'm asking is that you put that value back into the channel. Okay, so the technical manual plan does not work at all for making quality things, right? We're gonna put a pin in that for now because we need to tackle some myths about quality. This is gonna be the meat of the episode. Please bear with me. This is extremely important. It's gonna be a lot of specifics, but it is very important. And then we are going to move on to the thesis and kind of the goal of what this episode is. Shifting gears fully. If you have been deep into clothes for a long time, at some point, someone, your partner, your parents, your friends, has asked you, why do you care about this stuff so much? Also, it's so expensive. I could just get that from Primark. Have you seen it, Primark? They have good stuff now. Oh, and huge disclaimer time. I am by no means saying that people who need clothes for a job interview or need to clothe their children and they are in a time of financial crisis need to be paying ridiculous amounts of money for stuff. The audience of this channel are mostly fashion hobbyists. These are people who are buying clothes because it is their hobby. Any guilt tripping about fast fashion is directed at those people. I am not referring to people who are in times of financial crisis. So this question of like, why are you so into this stuff? That's a completely reasonable question to ask, because to a guy who just wants to get wings with his friends and watch sports, fashion must seem like just either something for complete idiots or for someone who desperately needs to prove they're rich to people. So to that question, I think many of us have said that the reason that we're into this is because our clothes are more high quality, which means that they last longer, they look better, and they're made more sustainably. Boom! Argument finished. Morning, bud.
Silencio. No photo. No video.
It is 11:47.
It is 11:47. Good morning.
Good morning. Barely.
Don't make this into a bit. I look terrible. I just got.
Don't worry. I absolutely won't use this footage no matter what.
Please don't use this footage.
This won't be in the video.
Please don't use this footage. Sponsored by Ricola.
Ricola has paid me zero money. Fuck Ricola.
Sponsored.
Okay, so to the question of... Okay, so to back it up, to the question of why are you so into fashion, like why even do this, we would just say that, well, our clothes are high quality, which means that they last longer, they look better, and they're made more sustainably, right? That's really only right if you don't look into it. Closer to the truth would be that none of that is actually true at all, sort of. Well, like it's complicated. Let's get into it. Let's address lasts longer first, because this has got to be the most common one that people cite. The idea here does make perfect sense on paper. If you keep buying $20 shirts and they keep like ripping or getting musty or losing their shape or something, and you keep having to replace them, the guy that buys one $100 shirt gets to enjoy a nicer shirt, have that shirt longer, and is at some point eventually in the future they're saving money. It's a really popular argument because there's not an easy counter for that. But We're now going to talk about how that is essentially not true at all. The reality is that in the last century, humans have created an enormous amount of innovations that have made each individually life a little bit better for a lot of people. You know those ketchup bottles where the opening is on the bottom rather than it just being like a normal jar or whatever? That is a simple, awesome idea. It's not saving any lives, but it is a tiny, teensy-weensy little thing that makes a lot of people's lives a lot simpler. There have been so many innovations like this, and clothing is one of the biggest beneficiaries of these innovations. The most obvious quality of life improvement to clothing that I can think of that's happened in the last 100 years is polyester thread. The tensile strength of polyester thread is much higher than cotton thread. What does this do? It just prevents seams from popping. And I guess seams can still pop, but in a lot of cases, those seams are just unbelievably strong in comparison to natural fiber threads, just because it's made of plastic. Just to give you an idea here, every garment, if you're under the age of 40, every garment that you've ever owned has been made of polyester thread. Don't forget, we're talking about the myth that expensive clothes last longer. Okay, so talking about, let's say, a t-shirt lasting longer is a difficult thing to talk about because of polyester thread. I cannot in good conscience tell you that a $200 designer t-shirt is going to last longer than a Kirkland Signature t-shirt. Both are using polyester thread. Okay, so the seams won't pop about as easily. What else? They don't stain as much. That's not true. If both the t-shirts are cotton, or at least if they're both made of the same thing, they're basically going to both be as susceptible to stains as the other. Maybe we could determine how long it holds its color for. That's not really going to work because faded clothes, first of all, are super in right now. And secondly, the color fastness thing tends to work better if you're using shitty, cheap dyes. The stuff that is made really nicely probably is going to lose its color faster because it's more likely that they're using natural dyes. Oh, but wait, pilling, right? I keep hearing this thing on TikTok about pilling, long staple and short staple. You got to find the long staple because the fibers are longer. So I'm not getting on to anyone who has talked about pilling online. That is true. Find me 2 companies that will tell you whether they use short staple or long staple cotton. And for that matter, do you know what qualifies as long staple cotton? I don't. Do you? Very few brands will even list that they're using long staple cotton. And if they do, frankly, I start thinking that we're getting into the selvage problem all over again, and I become deeply distrustful of that company. And if you have something where you're like, oh, actually, the definition of long staple is this, please put that in the comments. I love being corrected. My point here is that when you start going down the list of the aha, that's it, that's where the quality is, you just open up 3 or 4 more complicating factors that then also have to be explored. And then when you get those sorted, there's a whole nother layer of more things below that. It just kind of keeps going down. Again, if you have something to add on this that can help people find better quality clothes, please put it in the comments. But we're gonna move on. If a shirt does last longer, it's probably just because you're taking better care of it because you paid a lot of money for it. I still hand wash all of my t-shirts, even my undershirts and stuff. This one just dried. Washing machines are for socks and underwear only. Moving on to the second designer clothing myth. Designer clothes make you look better. This myth is more complicated than the first myth, but thankfully it's a little bit more objective.
The clothes at Dan Flash's look incredible because it's the pattern is so complicated. That's why they have to charge so much, is because the pattern is so complicated.
Great skit. And reality, this is sort of true. Tim Robinson's character here is using the word pattern to refer to the picture, all the tubes and pipes on his shirt, all the colors. That is not what pattern actually means in the fashion industry. That's a graphic. Pattern refers to the pieces that are used to then build a garment. They're the flat pieces that are shaped so that they can bring shape to the final product. The separate pieces of an article of clothing are all individually measured and cut and then must be sewn together. Centimeters that are added or subtracted from any of these lines or curves will have an impact on the way that the final garment fits. There are as many ways to design a pattern as there are people. The possibilities for making a coat or a shirt or pants are infinite. The greatest fashion designer who's ever lived, your favorite fashion designer, would say that a lot of the magic for a beautiful piece of clothing comes from its pattern design. So yes, if a pattern is legitimately very complicated and non-standard, that would make the garment much more expensive. A pretty simple example here is the Mersby Schwanen t-shirts, those ones that the guy from The Bear wears. For some of their shirts, they have a triangle pattern piece on the bottom of the armpit. What that does is it allows you a lot more freedom of mobility while still maintaining a tight and high armhole. And there are brands whose fame comes mostly from excellent, unique pattern cutting, like Rick Owens, who are not just designing for runway, they manufacture nearly everything that you see in these shows. The needs of the pattern cutting team are much more expensive at Rick Owens than the Kirkland Signature headquarters. And that unique pattern cutting is one of the major factors in making clothing look different on the wearer to an observer and feel different to the person who's putting it on. There's a lightweight coat that I own that has no zippers, no buttons, no toggles. There's really no fastenings or finishings at all. But when you close the coat, it holds itself together literally just using gravity and the weight of itself. So we found it. This is what makes expensive clothes higher quality. Not at all. There are two big caveats here. I'm just going to keep showing you footage of Rick here because I don't want to show bad examples of pattern cutting because I'm not trying to blow anybody up. Okay, so the idea that really advanced pattern cutting makes you look better in the clothes and it makes expensive clothes worth it. That is not true. The first caveat to that is that anyone can try to do crazy pattern cuts, and in fact, the number one problem that I see with young designers is that they're trying to do some crazy pattern cutting, but they just don't know how to do that well. When I am asked for advice, I always ask young designers a question back. I say, if you only had measuring instruments, physical drafting paper, and another person, could you take that person's measurements and make a physical pattern from scratch, not based off of another pattern, but from scratch, for a three-piece suit that fits them perfectly? No frills, nothing crazy, just a plain, perfectly fitting suit. If you can't do that, we may need to wait on the triple zip hooded parka with deconstructed shoulder outserts. Crazy pattern cutting is often what makes great clothes great, but crazy pattern design is also the easiest way to make a truly terrible garment. The second big caveat here is that unless this garment is bespoke, which next to nothing now is bespoke, it's probably not going to fit you. It can be the best, most advanced, crazy, innovative, beautiful pattern cutting in the whole world, but it's still going to be based off of a standardized sizing system. Unless you are a perfect small, medium, large, XL or double XL, it isn't gonna look right on you. This fact is what brings most expensive clothes down to the same place as Primark clothes. They all come in standardized sizing. It does not matter if you are a US size medium, an Italian 50, a Japanese 17, or an Australian 600. Every metric for measuring size is not made to fit you. It is made to fit an approximation of you along with about 10 million other people-ish, kind of. So me personally, I am 6'2", which is 188 centimeters for our Tuba Avalon fans. So that is pretty tall, but it's not like weirdly tall. Like I'm not playing in the NBA or anything. But despite me being a somewhat normal size, I have struggled to find clothes my entire life that fit me. Most of the time it just looks like I'm accidentally wearing a crop top, or that I'm wearing high waters, or that I'm just a growing boy. I do not look better in designer clothes unless I spend a shit ton of time curating what I'm wearing. In fact, the easiest way for me to look good all the time would be for me to shop at one of the fast fashion places that offers big and tall sizing. And of course, the response to this all the time is just get it tailored, right? Like I'm sure everyone has seen this on Reddit and Twitter and TikTok and everywhere else where it's like, oh, you need to get your clothes tailored, bro. I love getting my clothes tailored. I get most of my clothes tailored. I buy my tailor a Christmas gift. That person is incredible. They do an excellent job tailoring my clothes. The reality is that most tailors in the United States don't know what they're doing. I love my tailor. I get most of my clothes tailored and I am very pleased with the results. I had to get a lot of clothes botched by a lot of different tailors that didn't know what they were doing before I found someone that could do it correctly. Go get it tailored sounds great as like a Reddit comment, but in the real world, it just is much more complicated than that. And that will not be the final solution to the quality problem. The only surefire way for a piece of clothing, whether it's fast fashion or a very expensive piece of clothing, to look better on you is luck. Is anyone noticing a pattern here? Designer clothes do look better on people than fast fashion garbage. There are people who look bad in designer clothes and people who look great in fast fashion clothes, but I think generally all of us do, especially those of us that actually keep up with fashion, we do understand that people tend to look better in designer clothes. Why? Where is the quality? Where is it being held? How can I explain it so that we can just make it always happen in subsequent clothes? Why can I not actually find where it's located? Like, this reminds me a bunch of that conversation that is like a fun little brain exercise, but like has no answer, where it's like, where in the human body is the soul located? You're just like never going to find a satisfying answer to that question. Moving on. We are done with those first two myths. The third myth is that expensive clothes are at least they're more trendy. Designer clothing, after all, is the tippity top of the food chain. Like, if you go crash out and blow multiple bags at Dolce & Gabbana, at least you can say that's the only way to ensure that your clothes are truly of this moment. The way that this myth usually gets talked about is that the latest and greatest styles come out onto a fashion runway show, and then they find their way to middle market stores a couple of years later, and then a couple of years after that, they find their way into fast fashion places, and then they're on the clearance rack, and then the cycle begins all over again.
No, wait, that is true, Bliss. I saw it in The Devil Wears Prada in that one scene about cerulean belts. You think this has nothing to do with you, Bliss? You go to your closet and you select that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, and you're trying to tell the...
Yes, that system that Barbara Streisand is describing in that scene used to be true, but it's not even slightly true now. Unfortunately, fast fashion has gotten really, really good at stealing. For well over a decade, all fast fashion places have been duping runways constantly. The CEO of Fashion Nova said that he can have a sample within 24 hours of concepting a new garment, and he can have it on the site ready to sell in 2 weeks. Like, as in the company that put it on the runway when it premieres to the world and photos are all over Instagram and stuff, Zara can have a dupe of that in their window within 2 weeks, which is before the original company even thinks about manufacturing. They're not going to have theirs ready for 6 months. By the time the real one is actually on sale, Zara's already clearanced it. The cycle is done. And that sucks, obviously, but what's even worse is that a lot of fashion companies, runway fashion companies, don't even trust their own designers to design. A lot of these major companies that are doing runway shows in Paris and Milan and New York and London are using companies and services that are called trend forecasters. I will save you the super long-winded explanation. We actually got into trend forecasting networks in a big way in this episode. Essentially what it is that trend forecasting networks just use a shit ton of information and compile everything into digestible info so that they can just tell fashion companies, their clients, what their collection should look like. And they can get as specific as you want. Like, if you just want to know about like general trends, like what will be trendy in a couple of years, they'll tell you that. If you want to know about a color palette that you should use in order for this to look modern, they'll give you the whole color palette. They'll tell you everything that you need. If you want to know about like what finishing details, like how do people want pockets? Like what are like cool pockets for jeans now? They can get as specific as you want. That old idea that many of us romanticize in our brain of the genius designer who locks themselves away and works alone and then comes forward and is like, I present to the world, this is the new look. That is mostly gone. Or if it's not gone, we have no way as the audience of telling who's doing that and who isn't, or who's maybe halfway doing it. One luxury brand might have trend forecasters design their entire collection bottom to top. Another might only use trend forecasters for their color palette. Another might say, oh, well, of course we give our design team complete creative freedom for their runway collections, but once it's time to turn that collection into product, we of course consult our trend forecasting agency. I don't want to just flippantly act like everything is fucked. I mean, maybe none of the designers that I just showed you do that at all. Maybe none of them subscribe to WGSN or any other trend forecasting network. But if Daniela and I can't figure out which ones are, the general public has no hope of doing that at all. We're about to leave for our 10th Paris Fashion Week right now. We personally are friends with many of the designers that show in Paris. Like, we text them when it's not work time. And many of the other designers, we've been to their actual runway shows. We have no idea who's using trend forecasting networks. On to the next quality myth. Luxury fashion is more sustainable. This one is pretty complicated, and I want to say something here. I am not a scientist, and as far as like actual sustainability science is concerned, that is so important, and you should not be looking to me, a YouTuber, about the science of sustainability. Science is complicated. You should seek answers about science from scientists. But sustainability also, as an umbrella term, also refers to the treatment of the workers that are making things. So labor abuse, right? All of us are painfully aware that most of the products that we buy on a day-to-day basis that prop up the entirety of the Western world are made under mostly slave labor conditions.
If I start the washing machine...
Oh, you're good on the washing machine?
It won't...
It won't, no.
Feedback noises?
No. Thank you for asking. That's very kind of you.
Of course, yeah.
The reality is we are never going to know the full story of how something is made because governments do not make companies tell anyone that information. So yeah, with a lot of qualifiers, luxury fashion is more sustainable than middle market or fast fashion is true to a degree, but is also very complicated and has lots of nuance to it. Also, while this one is the most true out of all of these myths, I think what a lot of people mean when they say, oh, it's really high quality. Certainly, I expect that if I have purchased a luxury product that it was not made under slave labor conditions. But when I'm holding something and saying, oh, this is super high quality, the labor conditions are not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the physical properties of the object in my hand. And last thing on the sustainability stuff, at a minimum, you're incentivized to buy less of it, which I guess is more sustainable because it's so fucking expensive. Oh boy, we are not done. We are actually just getting warmed up. So if you have been having this video on in the background and just using it for just general ambiance in the room, I am so flattered by that. But I'd ask please for your attention for just a moment.
Quality. What is it? What does that mean? In order to answer that, we've had to dispel some quality myths about expensive clothes versus cheap clothes. 1. Expensive clothes last longer. Nope, not really, at least not in a consistent way. 2. Expensive clothes look better. This is true in the comment section of a Reddit post, but in the real world, it isn't necessarily true. 3. Expensive clothes are much trendier. No, that's not even remotely the case anymore. 4. Expensive clothes are made more sustainably. Sort of true, but not enough to be like the core selling point.
Now that we have unraveled all of these myths, we need to talk about whether or not quality is a real thing in the first place. There is an incredible book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. You might have had to read this for like college or high school or whatever. I strongly encourage you to reread it as an actual adult. This book is mind-blowing. It's somewhere between a pseudo-autobiographical novel and a philosophy text. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was the core text for creating this episode. And congrats to you if, like, in the first, few minutes of this video, you were like, this sounds a lot like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I'm gonna spare you the details of the wider plot of the story and the metaphysics of quality, as it is now referred to, and just kind of give you the core details we need. The book is about the author, Robert Pirsig, and his son, Chris, on a cross-country motorcycle trip together. As they're going, Robert has all these essays about life and relationships and maintaining a motorcycle. At one point, he's trying to explain to us, the audience, about how to maintain a motorcycle in a super effective way so that we, the audience, will get the same results out of our motorcycle that he gets out of his. But as he gets more and more specific, similar to how we got more specific a few minutes ago, he realizes that he's not actually going to end up relaying the information correctly to you. Even though he knows the information, he just can't give it to you in the right way so that just with that information, you'll have a well-maintained motorcycle. Same problem that we had with Andrew early on in the episode. This is such an incredible quote. I'm going to read it over some runway footage. Quote, "Quality. You know what it is, yet you don't know what it is. But that's self-contradictory. But some things are better than others. That is, they have more quality. But when you try to say what the quality is, apart from the things that already have it, it all goes poof. There's nothing to talk about. But if you can't say what quality is, then how do you know what it is? Or how do you even know it exists? If no one knows what it is, then for all practical purposes, it does not exist at all. But for all practical purposes, it does exist. What else are grades based off of? Why else would people pay fortunes for some things and throw other things in the trash pile? Obviously, some things are better than others, but what's the betterness? So round and round you go, spinning mental wheels and nowhere finding any place to get traction. What the hell is quality? Quality has to be an abstract concept. And before you get onto Robert or onto me for being like, oh, sure, like we're taking the like ethereal kind of like, oh, everything is everything kind of route. That's not what this is. If quality is not an abstract thing, then it just becomes a list of boxes to check and then you run into the fucking selvage problem again. What makes quality eggs? Oh, free range, right? Like cage for free range. Okay, so then we end up having commercials that sound like this. Hey fella. Do you ever get tired of the bustling city life and yearn for a taste of homegrown flavor? Then try the high-quality eggs at Profit Farm Co., where we have technically met the FDA prerequisites to legally call our eggs free range. You should look up what the actual legal definition of free range is sometime. It's pretty funny. So yeah, you want selvage denim? We got selvage denim, buddy. What do you want, raw denim? Oh, these are raw right here. You want loop wheeled? We got them for $4.99, buddy. And I know it now, especially at this point in the episode, it is very tempting to just say,
dude, fuck this. Everything is a scam. Nothing means anything. Every fashion brand sucks. I'm just gonna buy 3 Uniqlo outfits every year, and I'm just not gonna think about it anymore.
that probably would be the right response unless we can adapt what our idea of quality is. The definition that we've been using for quality was never helping us, even if we felt like it was helping us. The only thing that produces quality is care. The person who made your shirt needs to themselves feel that I have done good work making this shirt. And in order to get to that place, importantly, that designer must be willing to put in the time and the money to even know what their own satisfaction should look like. The satisfaction of the maker, that is what you and I, as the purchaser, need to be looking for. We have a lot more to cover here, but I just want to say real quick that this episode, I realize, has been mostly bad news. The internet is kind of set up for you to be browsing around on TikTok or YouTube and then to pull up a video and then I tell you something about like, you know, how straight seams are, like the way that panels are shaped on a blouse, and then you're like, great, good to know, and then you aren't able to use that information the next time you go to the Gap. I'm sorry that I can't give you an easy answer to this, but frankly, if you're giving me your time, I respect you enough to not lie to you. I've been a fashion critic for 5 years. Daniela has been a fashion critic for about three years. Yeah. We have been to 9 Paris Fashion Weeks, and we are going to our 10th here in a couple of days. Very exciting. Over the course of our careers, we have unfortunately encountered a few times brands that we thought were just totally untouchable, that we loved before. And then when you get in the room with the actual product, all the product, not just the buy at Saks or whatever, or the one thing that you have from them, but you get in the room with everything, and you realize it's mostly crap. It is at least for me, that was an experience that bothered me so much that I was still like pretty shaken by it a few weeks after I had experienced it for the first time. But over the course of our fashion journey, we have found a few brands that we think demonstrate extremely high quality, at least as far as what we've been able to observe. We're going to talk about a few briefly here. And those are going to be Geoffrey B. Yan Yan Vanessa, and Hermès. We have encountered other companies that demonstrate very high quality, but we're going to stick to those 3 examples because they operate so differently as businesses. We have had the pleasure of spending a great deal of time in Geoffrey B. Small's workroom in Italy, documenting it thoroughly through footage and interviews. I own a vintage pair of trousers by GBS and a suit from his Evolution 9 collection, which is last season. We've interviewed Yan Yan Vanessa more times than any other designer on this channel. We've been to his atelier, and I own about 10 pieces of clothing by him, most of which are t-shirts. We go to Hermès' runway shows and showrooms every Paris Fashion Week, and Daniela and I have a small collection of their accessories, which is mostly just scarves and different silk pieces and cool little pieces of hardware. And I only list that stuff off so that you kind of understand what my qualifications are for speaking to the quality of those brands. Okay, in no particular order, let's start with GBS. Geoffrey has a couple dozen employees that work in his super workroom, is what he calls it, in Italy under his direct physical supervision. From what I have observed, it seems that the goal of this company is to create the highest quality clothes possible. Like that maze that I was describing to you of like long staple, short staple. What's the definition of long staple? Oh, does that cause cause any other problems? What are those problems? Okay, what are the details of those problems? How can you fix those problems? Oh, we found more problems. That whole thing, his goal is to get as far down into that ocean as he possibly can. When I interview Geoffrey, he often can spend 10 minutes talking about a single piece of clothing. And speaking of those specs, every article of clothing he sells comes with more information and details concerning that article of clothing than I thought there were details to be known. Geoffrey has personally vetted and works very closely with mostly local suppliers who make what he considers to truly be the best zippers in the world, the best cashmere in the world, the best buttons in the world, the best thread in the world, and on and on and on it goes. Last thing is that he recently told me that in 2023 they produced about 1,800 articles of clothing total. I don't think you have to have an MBA to understand that that is an extremely small number of objects. If you're immediately interested in that, I have 2 very long-form interviews with Geoffrey and a huge project coming later in the future. Yan Yan Vanessa is another small company, but the difference is that they work with suppliers all over the world. If Geoffrey is the tippity top of small batch artisanal work, Yan Yan and his business and life partner Pietro are the best quality clothes that can be made with manufacturing. These clothes are not usually made in the physical presence of Yan Yan or Pietro, but the sheer volume of things that they do in order to ensure that they are getting their goals met is just unbelievable. When I visited their studio in Antwerp, Yan Yan told me about his philosophy of pattern cutting that he refers to as openness in design. We also got to see how their employees make all the prototypes in-house, how every day someone cooks family meal for everyone else, and how one employee weaves a limited amount of cloth on a hand loom. That employee, named Lamine, is also one of their main house models. He looks great in everything. And those garments that are made from the hand-woven textiles by Lamine, those are very limited in number and they end up costing an insane amount of money. But I want you to name for me one other company, just one, that has a loom in their headquarters that is used every season to make product. I'll wait. Anybody. Name another company. Additionally, if that interests you, we have a whole episode about Yan Yan Vanessa, and we have multiple interviews on the Patreon where he goes into incredible detail about each specific garment that we're talking about. Hermès is included in this list because they are a global, massive company that are somehow seemingly still doing things the right way. The number one way to make low-quality stuff is to do it through a gargantuan global company, but Hermès is still checking most of my boxes. Despite most folks conflating the Birkin with Hermès, generally they are not just a bag company, they are an overall luxury goods company. And their standard of quality that they produce for all of those objects in all the categories is frankly insane. How do I know that? Because every time I go into an Hermès store, whether I'm touching a blanket or a box, a wooden display box, I touch these things and go, oh damn. I do that a lot. Again, it's not just a bag brand, but most of the reporting about this company has been about the bag, so we'll talk about that. A Birkin, for example, is made from beginning to end by the same artisan. It usually takes about 18 work hours to do that. And those employees, we are told, are usually not allowed to make quota bags until they've been at the company for a number of years. And those artisans are not just out working somewhere in the world. Hermès employs, as like their employees, 6,000 artisans. 6,000 people are making the objects at Hermès in France. They get stuff from other places too, but 6,000 people are actively making things in France. Beyond little factoids about the brand, I regularly see product there that you can't find anywhere else, at least that I haven't seen. This is a leather top with an insane amount of ostrich feathers on it. It is stunningly beautiful. They only use leather that hasn't been grain corrected, and that leather gets generously used in the most luxe men's outerwear that I've ever felt in my life. Oh, whoops, actually, wait, I'm getting back to like checking like boxes and stuff like must be ostrich feather, must be non-grain corrected leather. You get my point though. But speaking of listing things, that brings us into our next point. I don't have any way of I guess I do have a way, but I do not know what the best cashmere in the world is supposed to feel and look like. Like if you sat me down and did a blind test between the greatest, objectively, the greatest, highest quality cashmere in the world, and then the 9th best cashmere in the world, I would probably tell you that they feel about the same. But I spent 2 full weeks shadowing Geoffrey everywhere but the shower, and that man is obsessed with cashmere. He does know what the best cashmere is. And he does know what the best thread is. And the difference between a half a centimeter here and over here, I maybe can't tell what the difference between those things are. Geoffrey fucking knows. So if you were to ask me, why are Geoffrey's clothes so high quality? The answer is that I trust him. Why is the Hermès Calvi so important? I mean, looking at it here, is the quality ghost just jumping off of your phone screen at you? It's not. And there's nothing crazy happening here while I hold it either. The big deal about the Hermès Calvi is that I trust Hermès. The person who selected the leather, the person who cut and built it, the person who did quality assurance, the person who packaged it, and the person that sells it. All of those people care a lot about that wallet. I trust them. It's just about care. The person making something has to care. And this poses, by the way, a huge problem because I'm a fashion critic. Daniela and I travel around the world. Both of us are fashion critics. We travel the world and we look at fashion and we learn as much as we can about it so that we can hopefully bring that to you in an entertaining and informative way. I hope there's trust between us when I make a recommendation to you. You trust that I actually am if I'm saying this actually is good, I hope that you would trust me. But me saying I trust this designer, at best, for you, that is secondhand trust. And there are tons of brands maybe that you want to know if you should trust them or not, and we've just never covered them before. Those are real problems, and I don't know what to tell you about that. Maybe, and I really don't know here, I'm just kind of throwing stuff out. Maybe the idea of quality has to become something that the customer engages in as well. I'm not just going to do one Google search or one Reddit search in order to figure out what jeans I should buy. I'm going to take an active participatory role in learning about what quality even means in terms of jeans. Maybe that involves learning about textiles. Maybe it involves learning about how anything is made. Maybe a quality decision for us purchasing a product means that we are holistically knowledgeable about what we're doing. And I know that that is a frustrating answer if you have a wedding coming up this weekend and you just need a fucking suit. But again, I don't feel comfortable sitting up here and lying to you. I think this is the truth. I've thought a lot about this. Danny is so sick of hearing about the quality thing. I've thought about this for a long time. This is all I can come up with. This is kind of a footnote, but I do feel like we should make it clear here. If you like fashion, you do not need a practical reason for why you like it. I mean, gamers are not out here claiming that playing 5 hours of League of Legends every day improves your cognitive ability or some shit. If you are looking for permission, I will just give it to you now. You do not need your parents to approve of this. You do not need your friends to approve of this. You don't need your partner to approve of this, frankly. You need to accept that you can like something. You're allowed to like something for subjective reasons. And that you doing all this research that I just suggested, that is not a prerequisite for you enjoying something. I find that this is especially difficult for men. They feel like they need to somehow justify their interest in clothes to their buddy whose only interests are rewatching Breaking Bad and smoking weed. Why we need to justify it to that guy, I have no idea, but I see a lot of guys trying to do this. I have got to give a gargantuan shout out to Robert Pirsig, the late Robert Pirsig, for writing Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. If you have not read that, again, you really need to read it. Also, shout out Jimmy Barker, who is the person who put me onto that when I was literally interviewing him during our second Paris Fashion Week ever. Okay, if you finished the episode, you're to this point, I appreciate you so much. You are the best. Go watch a full-length interview with Geoffrey B, Smaller, Jan Vanessa on the Patreon. They are phenomenal. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye. All good?